and welcome to The Ripple Impact, the podcast where we dive into those fascinating small moments, big decisions, and unexpected ripples that create waves of change in brands, businesses, leadership, and in life. I'm Laura Barber, founder of The Ripple Impact, a global brand strategist who spent over 20 years inside global giants like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. And now I work with founders and brand leaders on brand strategy, positioning, and storytelling, helping leaders turn human stories into brand growth. Each week, I sit down with bold thinkers, founders, and what we call wave maker guests to explore the ripple moments that have shaped their journey and the lessons that you can take to transform your own brand, your business, and your life. Today, I am so excited to have Elaine Atkinson with us, an executive coach, leadership facilitator, and founder of a business built around one powerful belief that career success is an inside job. Elaine's story spans from growing up in Northern Ireland, traveling the world, climbing the corporate ladder into senior leadership roles at Deloitte, and then making the brave decision to walk away from external success to build a life and a business that felt truly aligned. Her work today helps leaders silence their inner critic, trust their instincts, and reconnect with who they are, not just who they think they're supposed to be. Elaine, welcome to the show. It is such a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on the huge success of your podcast. So I feel really privileged to be here with you.
Oh, it's an honor to have you on the show. We actually got talking around instincts and gut instincts and what drives people, and that led us to the conversation today. So wonderful to have such an amazing conversation to then lead it to a podcast. So deeply privileged to have you on the show today. So thank you for joining us. So on The Ripple Impact, we love to go back to the beginning and talk about the pivotal, instrumental, what we call ripple impact moments in people's lives and what has really shaped them, their journey, and what has led them to the career that they've got now. So you're an incredible coach now extraordinaire with an amazing business of your own. But what led you there? Talk us through some of the big ripple impact moments in your life, from Northern Ireland to university to travel to corporate. You've had some big ripple impact moments. Can you tell our listeners and our YouTube watchers just some of the little snippets as what brought you here today?
Yeah, and look, I really love the concept of your podcast, because certainly my career has been a series of moments and decisions, some consciously made and some not so, rather than sort of big dramatic overhauls. So it really resonated with me, the topic. And yes, I did grow up in Belfast, in Northern Ireland. And if I'm honest, when I was at school, like everyone, I knew the subjects that I liked, but I didn't really have a clear career plan. And at the time, support was limited in terms of career guidance and advice. So I just followed at the time what I was interested in. And then my sister went to uni, so I followed her. I went through clearing and then I ended up in university in Scotland, which I was secretly really pleased about because I always wanted to travel. And it was the first step in being able to do that. I studied history and politics. There were some subjects that I liked. But when I left, again, no clear idea what I wanted to do. And if I'm honest, I wasn't even aware of graduate programs and what those meant and how you got a graduate placement. But all I knew is that I wanted to travel. And I don't know if that was just the adventure in me or just to experience different cultures. So I did travel. I went around the world. I settled in Australia, actually, and I lived there, ended up living there for 10 years. And that's really where my corporate career began. But again, there's a theme here. I kind of fell into that. I did a little bit of extra study. I thought, right, what am I going to do? And then I fell into recruitment. That was a brilliant platform for me to have a really good career, work with some great brands, work your way up into senior leadership roles and really helping organizations scale and grow by helping them hire talent. So it was great in the beginning. But I think over time, it started to feel like my career was leading me rather than the other way around. And again, I think this is where some of those other ripple moments came in.
And what do you mean by that? Like the idea that a career is leading you versus you leading it. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so the first ripple moment for me in my career, and like all of these things almost come with hindsight, but when I joined the first organization, I was attracted to it by this amazing woman. She was my first boss in the corporate world. She was fearless. She was super smart. I wanted to be her. And I also wanted her approval. And I would do anything to get it. And that meant, when she praised me, it was almost like the sun shone on me. But if I made a mistake or there was a negative comment, or maybe she was in a bad mood one day, but she didn't show me as much attention, I would take that personally then. And it was like then the sun set. And this is where I started to get into this maybe unhealthy pattern of, I have to impress people and praise is important and success was more what other people thought of me.
Yeah.
And if you learn that earlier in your career, it can be quite dangerous because then I suppose what you think about yourself, how you see yourself, what you're good at, what you think's possible is very much shaped by others. And of course, for a while, it works. People are impressed with you in the corporate world. They give you more responsibility. But there comes a point, though, where it can be unhealthy and you're slowly giving your sense of self away. And then what did I do? I started to repeat that pattern with other managers. You start to choose comfort and being liked and approved rather than on authenticity.
Yeah, that's so interesting because what you're talking about is this element of almost professional affirmation where you were trying to please her and then ultimately other bosses by doing an incredible job and that driving your need to do really well and get that appraisal back. But in the
Yeah.
short term, that was really successful for you, wasn't it? Because it got you to a really senior position in your career. But interestingly, you also mentioned there, and it felt like almost you were describing it as well, almost you being chipped away at a little bit. Was that your sense of personality or values or identity or?
I think I was still in there in moments, I've always valued honesty. And so some of that would still come out, but it would still be controlled. If you went too far out of that sort of little comfort zone or that sort of mold that you built for yourself, you'd quickly bring yourself back in again, particularly if you felt the approval wasn't going to be there. And
Yeah.
look, in hindsight, doing the work that I do now, don't feel too bad about it because the corporate world rewards doers.
Yeah.
It likes people with something to prove because you go in there and you work hard and you want to progress, you want to take on additional responsibilities. So in a way, I was doing what the structure and the system was happy for me to do. And in the beginning, I liked the structure. I liked the performance goals and the measures that you had to follow to say, right, I've achieved that. I'm successful.
And take us back, because when we spoke before, you talked about a moment when you're on holiday in Greece and you just realized, actually, I don't think this is for me. I've got to a really senior position now. I've ticked all the boxes. I've actually achieved what I set out to do. And isn't that
Yeah.
amazing? But then this realization that you were like, actually, I don't think I'm actually quite happy in what I'm doing, even though I've achieved everything that I want. Can you take us back to that moment and what was going through your mind and what ultimately then led to what you're doing now?
Yeah, it reminds me of that phrase, be careful what you wish for because you might just get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I want to be balanced because there was one promotion. I had lots of promotions on an accelerated career path. Okay? And, my managers would say, can you not just stay in one role for a bit longer? But I was ambitious and I think I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And maybe when you were looking at what other people were doing, you were trying to say, well, I could do that. And why not me? Because certainly my parents left me with this belief you can do whatever you put your mind to. So I thought, right, well, why not me? That's not a bad mindset to have necessarily. And then the more you got promoted, that was validation that you were on track. So you keep chasing the next one. And you're measuring success then by, right, well, I've got this role, I've got the next role, I've got the next role. But there was one promotion that was hard fought and hard won, took a long time. And people would say to me, oh, if you got to that level in this organization, that's really impressive. And so, as you said, I'm in holiday in Greece in this beautiful hotel that my career enabled me to be able to stay in. And sitting there thinking, right, I should be thinking now I've made it, but feeling unfulfilled and flat and a little bit deflated, very closely followed by you're ungrateful. You've achieved this, you're in this beautiful place and you're still complaining. So, that
Yeah.
little window open to go, something's not right, and then
Mm.
quickly shut again. Just telling myself, well, this is what it is. And maybe you're just tired. Maybe it's this, all the reasons why. Don't look too closely here. And if I'm honest, it was scary to contemplate. Why have I been climbing this ladder the whole time? and maybe this ladder's against the wrong wall. But what I did, I ignored my feelings. I went back to work. Not long after that, I experienced a period of burnout. I sacrificed some other things, maybe personally, that I want to achieve along the way. And I just went back into everyone uses this phrase, the hustle, to keep striving, keep pushing.
Yeah. And that only took you so far, right? Because you hit a moment where you were like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. And, we're all told that success is upwards and these ladders. And I love this quote from Matt Haig, the author. And he talks about, the problem with ladders, that when going up them, there's no room to move around when you're up there, and there's only room to fall. And I love that quote because it just shows you sometimes how restrictive the career paths that we're told we can have are, and we buy into that. And it's not to say that that's not good for some people, but if you lose yourself while you're climbing, then I think that's where you need to maybe look a bit closer. And then I certainly did. And I think I got to the point, and this is probably less a ripple moment and more a point where I said, I can't take it anymore. And I left my role with nothing to go to, which, in hindsight, looking back, it was huge. It was scary to do that because I was always so sure of what I was going to do. And so it was also really uncomfortable. I mean, I felt proud of myself and I thought it was brave. And, when you make these decisions, you can sort of pat yourself on the back. And so, you're trusting yourself. Everyone else was telling me, really admire you for this decision. But then once all the noise quietens down and then you're left with the discomfort, that's not easy.
No. As you said, such a powerfully brave moment to say no or to say yes to yourself, depending on how you want to look at it, and step
Well,
out
yeah.
of nowhere to go. But yeah. I mean, I've been through that. I can feel that when you're left then with the choice and you're left with your decision to go, okay, right, what's next? I just want to pick up on your point on ladders as well. Like, it's so interesting. I'd never thought it before in that way, but also a ladder implies that it's really linear, isn't it? As well, there is literally one path and you get to the top and then what? And I love, this concept of like squiggly careers. And so many people talk about, so much movement in their careers and different choices and it implies such a straight line of decision making, and you get to the top and then what? So I love that. And you've actually described it before as actually a ladder isn't the best way to think about it. Actually, you should think about your career as a map. Can you tell our listeners about that? Because I love this analogy. I think it's such a beautiful way to think about careers.
Yeah, this is one I use with my clients. And again, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I've developed it in hindsight from my own experience. But if because the ladder, as you said, it's quite a fixed sort of view, or people talk about a crossroads in their career. But even that, there's more options, but it's still quite limited. But if you looked at a map and your career is a map, and it's got plenty of different routes and detours and pit stops, but the difference is you're the navigator, right? And I think we can be quite harsh on ourselves. If we make a move in our career and it doesn't work out, that it's failure. But sometimes that route is taking you then to the next place, and that's where you were always meant to be. And also this view that success, for example, if you're going anywhere and you're traveling, it's not always about the destination. It's actually the journey along the way. And I think when you view your career in that way, it gives you more a sense of agency, but also a little bit of grace around the fact that you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have these massive big leaps. It can be a series of steps, one in front of the other, but knowing that there are multiple options.
Yeah.
It's quite freeing. Yeah.
The map analogy is just beautiful because two things spring to mind there as well, as like the journey is the beauty, not necessarily just the destination, and just enjoying that and embracing that. And this other quote really springs to mind as well, is that not all who wander are lost.
Yeah.
And that's such a lovely analogy in careers as well, because a lot of people talk about, I didn't intend on this career, or I fell into it, sometimes the language, or I stumbled across this, or I kind of like that, so I did this.
Yeah.
Actually, you can take these different turns in your career and actually it can create something beautiful, and you don't have to know where you're going to still find something that you're deeply brilliant and deeply passionate about. So I love that. It's a fantastic way of talking about a career, something much more squiggly and defined. Is really lovely.
I think it's also about learning to, it's okay to feel a bit uncomfortable as well. think we chase certainty and we want to control everything. And certainly leaving a job with nothing to go to, not that I feel everyone has to do that, but it really taught me that I can sit with discomfort and sort of carry it around with me every day, knowing that I can still feel that way, but still feel empowered to take the next step or have the next conversation or explore the next option. And for me, that's something even I carry now. You know, as a business owner and a founder yourself, there's a lot more uncertainty when you run your own business. So I think just learning to lean into that. I had this quote on my wall and it was from Susan David. And she's written this lovely book about emotional agility. And it was discomfort is the price of admission for a meaningful life. And I just every day when I'd come in and feel uncertain or unsure, I just thought, this is part of it. If you want more meaning, more fulfillment in your career and in your life, this is the answer. And you've just got to embrace it. Isn't it funny how these quotes can be just, I don't know, you read them at the right time in your life and it's what you need to just keep seeing you through, plus taking some action.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that quote. It's beautiful. I feel like I need to stick that somewhere myself. No, it's true, because when you said about the action piece, I mentioned this a lot because a lot of my guests talk about serendipitous moments of meeting someone, a chance encounter, or, going to an interview they didn't really want, or whatever it might be, these serendipitous moments. And they're quite casual about kind of what happened. And my response is always, yes, but that moment only turned into something because you took action. It's so easy for things to pass you by in life. And it's only when you grab things and you do something with it that a serendipitous moment can actually turn into something quite powerful and something quite meaningful. I love that. I mentioned right at the beginning, I love the way you talk about this, is that a career is an inside job. And one of the most powerful conversations that we had when we first talked, and we know we talk about gut instincts and what drives people, you talked about this wonderful thought around the inner critic and the inner champion and the voice inside you and what it's telling you and what it's quietly or potentially loudly running or ruining your life or your career. Can you talk us through the inner critic and its role that it plays in life, in leadership, in teams, in people, and how you work with people now and how you help people lead and work and live through this idea of the inner critic and the inner champion?
Yeah. Well, we start with the inner critic. I suppose that's a term I would use with my clients a lot. And it's quite a common term I think people are aware of. But for anyone who isn't familiar with it, it's just that voice in your head that when you are about to try something new or you've made a mistake in work, and it's this voice in your head that just comes in and it's really harsh, very critical. It could often be very black and white as well. Well, you've either succeeded or you've failed. There's no shades of grey. And it's often quite loud as well. And it's hard sometimes to shut off. And it can lead you to overthink or spiral. And sometimes for some of my clients, including myself, procrastinate. Oh, don't make that decision. And we all have a voice like that. And it's formed from our past experiences. It's not all bad though, because it's trying to keep you safe. But how it does, it loves the familiar and it loves the status quo, right? So if I'd listened to my critic, I wouldn't have left my corporate job. I wouldn't have taken the steps after that led to me starting my own business. I would have said, well, I'm going to stay where I am because it's safe. And I know people have responsibilities. And as I said, this isn't about leaping everywhere, but it is slowly backing yourself, managing that voice within, that voice that's trying to stop you and moving forward. But that can be quite loud for people. So a lot of the work I do in my coaching is to get them familiar with this voice. What is it saying to you, to challenge it so that you can manage it a bit better, so that you can actually hear the other side. And as you've said, some people call it their champion or their inner mentor, but that's very closely linked to your instinct and your intuition.
Yeah.
But it's quieter. And unless you can manage the critic, it's hard to hear this.
Yeah. Isn't it fascinating and a little bit sad that the inner critic is always the louder voice than the inner champion? And as you said, how you manage the inner critic and let the more quieter voice of your instinct and your guts and your inner champion actually shine through. Why do you
Yeah.
think that is?
Well,
Is it
look, I think
protection?
it's partly from growing up, the systems and the structures in which you operate. When you're in school, it's
Mm,
about getting good grades, it's about being good, it's about following the rules. Right. And then if you move into the corporate world, it rewards doers. It's about speed. It's about certainty. It's about decisiveness. If you're a high achiever, you actually are known usually for being very reliable and for doing what other people ask of you. So it gets reinforced that you will almost outsource more of your judgment. You'll seek approval rather than alignment with actually what do I want, what do I need, and what's important. Now,
yeah.
it's not to say that it's black and white, but if you're in these environments, you're actually rewarded for not necessarily sitting back, reflecting, slowing down to hear your instinct and your intuition. Because the systems that you're in almost reward the opposite. So I think we've got to give ourselves a little bit of grace or compassion around that
Yeah.
because we all struggle with it. And if you're a leader, I think the best ones are able to operate within these systems and structures, but they do so with a really good sense of who they are.
Hmm.
And that's what I'm alluding to when I talk about career and leadership success as an inside job. Because if you know yourself really well first, you can manage your emotions, you know what matters to you. I think you can operate more effectively and influence these structures and systems better, but it starts with you.
Yeah, I love that. I want to get inside the theory and the science of gut instincts and what drives people. And there must be some science behind the gut. Like, and again, this is how we first got talking. Is I was like, I'm desperate to get someone on the podcast to talk about good instincts and intuition and what drives people because it feels like such a strong thing, but it's not something that is talked about much or explained. What do you think the science behind the gut instinct is and why we choose to listen or not to it?
Yeah. Well, in essence, what it is, it's your brain and your nervous system recognizing patterns from your past experiences. And they're doing that faster than your conscious mind can explain. And it often shows up as a feeling because the insight arrives in your body before the words do. Right? And like if
Wow.
you think about it, can you remember a time, even in your own business, where you took a course of action or you made a decision and you just knew it was the right thing to do?
Oh, all the time. All the
Yeah.
time. I literally said to my partner the other day, I know about X, Y, and Z and ABC, but it just feels right.
Yeah.
It was completely
Right.
just instinctual.
Yeah. And it is going back in your filing cabinet of experiences in the past and
Yeah.
saying, well, what do we do in this situation? What feels right? And I suppose it's linking your intuition is flagging something. Then of course it's okay and useful to bring your logic in to test it. And then your experience to put it into context. So I'm not saying it's just intuition alone, but it's starting there, layering in the logic and bringing in the experience to decide what the best way forward. And so if you think about your critic and your intuition, they're both trying to help you, but one is trying to do it more through fear, control, trying to predict risk, rejection, failure, whereas this one is more about trusting yourself.
Mm.
Yes, using some logic, looking at past experience and moving forward anyway, even if there is a little bit of doubt.
And why do you think some people find it a lot easier to trust their instincts? Is it because they've managed the inner voice?
I think it's mixed. I think it depends on your childhood experiences, sometimes the education, the school type of school that you've been to, your parents, your experiences in the corporate world or business will impact all of that. And we're all quite unique and different. Like some people, that critic is in the driving seat in their life. For others, they've learned to manage it and it's more sort of sits in the back seat. It'll always be with you, particularly if you're someone that likes to stretch, grow, and develop yourself. But it's trying to, I suppose, learn the skill of managing it so that you can trust yourself more. So I think it depends on a lot of different things. But my experience of being in the corporate world, I think you're trained to override your instinct and your intuition. There's not a lot of time for it. And I think sometimes logic and consensus wins the day in those environments. And even if you do feel it. You're always navigating. Is it risky to share this view or make this decision?
Yeah.
And then you tell yourself, like I did, oh, maybe I should be grateful, or everyone just feels like this. I'm just tired. And then it's almost like you've gone back to that default setting of, well, no, this is what it is.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so interesting. So interesting. So you've gone through this process, right? Because in a certain sense, you've silenced your inner critic by taking the bold and brave decision to leave a corporate career, go, this isn't for me, and to set up your own business. How did you do that? And how would you advise other people to silence their inner critic? What's the work that needs to be done to really do that and do that well?
Yeah, and I'm always trying to be really clear. It's not like, yes, I left my corporate career, set my business, I made the leap. Look at me, I'm so brave, right? Yes, there was an element of courage in that. And as I said to you, sitting with the discomfort. But then it was doing the work. I had a bit of space where I was able to take a step back and reflect and really think about, what do I want? What am I good at? What do other people tell me I'm good at? What matters to me? If the work is interesting, what have I been good at in the past that people might pay me for because I'm good at it? But it
Yeah.
wasn't then that I went, great, I'm going to become a coach and set up my business. It was a series of steps. I went back in, I studied my coaching qualification. I went back into the corporate world, but with a promise to myself that I would show up as an even more authentic leader and I would do it on my terms. Then I worked part-time. Then I created this side hustle of coaching. And then eventually I made the move to setting up my own practice. And that journey was over 3 years, right? Because I think some people feel, and again, maybe this is your critic saying, well, if you wanted to change anything, you've got to blow up your career and life to do it. So, and that's the fear talking. It's
Yeah.
too risky. So don't bother, right? When actually doing the work, doing the reflection, and putting one step in front of the other, right? Because that's where the confidence comes. When you start taking action, as you mentioned earlier, suddenly the stuff that feels scary goes like, I can't believe I was nervous about that. And the action is absolutely important too.
Yeah. So be scared and do it anyway.
Yeah, a little bit like that. And I always think now I'm constantly scared running my own business, but I don't see the fear as something wrong or bad. I see it as in, well, if I'm feeling fear, I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone again. So, I'll stick it in my handbag and I'll go ahead with it. You know what I mean? I'll go ahead anyway.
And how do you work with clients on their inner critic? What steps and advice and tips and tricks would you give our listeners to someone sat there going, gosh, my inner critic is so loud and so persistent. What can I do?
Yeah. And I think this is probably the core of the work I do with my clients, managing this critic and then also getting them to tap into their intuition, their instinct, or their champion, as I would call it. Now, there's a couple of things. In the moment, it can be as simple as pausing. So when you feel triggered by something, literally slowing down, which I know it's hard to do sometimes, is sitting down, getting away from your computer and actually noticing what's happening in your body. Because a lot of your emotions, your feelings, they're information that something isn't right. And actually saying, what's happening in my body right now? And then actually asking yourself, is this fear speaking to me? Or is this quiet voice that is nudging me in the right direction? And then choosing how you respond instead of reacting. So that's something that you can do sort of in the moment. Anyone could do that. It takes 60 seconds to just pause and notice what's happening in your body and ask that question. Is this fear or is this my instinct telling me this is the right path? And then choose one small step. That's in the moment. The deeper work I would do with the client is really getting to know their critic, right? And really getting to know their champion. How does this voice speak to you? Okay. When does it show up? Because a lot of people are great in lots of circumstances, okay, in their life. They're doing great in their career, but it might be when they're in senior meetings, their critic goes to town on them. And then what do they want from you? And then do the opposite with your intuition. When do you really trust yourself? What does that voice sound like? And when you've listened to it before, what was the result? So that's a bit deeper. And then the one I used personally, which I still use today, because yes, I'm a coach. I'm still a work in progress as a business founder, as a leader. I'm still working through. But I think what I'm better at now is moving from my critic to my champion much faster and trusting my champion. But I like to write. So if I'm really facing a difficult decision or I know I'm holding myself back, I'll set a timer on my phone. I'll write a letter to myself from my critic, no filtering. They're only allowed 10 minutes. And I just get it all out on paper and I handwrite it. So old school. Okay. But there's something that happens when you write, it comes down your arm onto the paper, but you couldn't read it. My handwriting is awful. But then after the 10 minutes, I might walk away, get a drink, and I'll come back and read it. And sometimes you're surprised going, oh, all of that is going on in my head. And then
Yeah.
what I'll do is I'll go, right, you've had your say, critic. And then I write a letter back to the critic from my instinct, from my inner champion, almost soothing it to say, you don't need to worry because this is what we'll do. And if it doesn't work out, this is what we'll do. And this is the next step we'll take. And that's 10 minutes too. And if I'm feeling really good at the end of it, where I go, right, I've processed that, I've managed it, I rip up the first letter.
Yes, love that.
You know what I mean? And it's going, right, it just clears the space much faster instead of those thoughts staying in your head. Because, you know, like I can overthink like the best of them. So I'd say those are my three things that people you could try tomorrow to really help you get a handle on who you are, you know, when you're at your best versus what gets in your way.
Yeah. Three very different ways of approaching it, from the everyday little pause. So when you catch
Mm.
it, hear it in your head, just
Yeah.
pausing, taking time out and going, is this my fear kicking in? Or is this my instinct? Like, what's happening here? Is this helping or hindering? Is my
Yeah.
fear kicking in because it's genuinely trying to protect me from something that I should be avoiding? Okay, maybe I should listen. Or maybe it's just my inner critic who's scared and needs reassurance. It's such powerful daily practice that people could do instantly. And then this idea of deep work on your inner critic and getting to know. I love this sort of get to know your inner critic. So name it, give it a character,
Yeah.
give it an outfit, like get it really to visualize it so that maybe you can empathize maybe then a little bit more with your inner critic rather than just thinking, oh, there it is again.
Yeah.
I love this thought of really getting to know your inner critic to understand
Yeah.
how to then tell it a different story and reframe what it's saying to something that's going to serve you and something that's going to be really helpful in your business or in your career or just in your everyday life.
And I love what you said there because, you know, you don't want to demonize it either because that's what your critic loves. It's like, right, you want to fight me? Well, let's get into a fight. And it's sucking your energy and attention, you see? But if you don't view it necessarily as a demon, it's like like a bad friend who gives you bad advice or a good friend who you still keep around, but they're always giving you bad advice. That's probably more accurate, but they're still in your life, right? And sometimes there might be something that your critic is saying that is true. Okay. There might be a kernel of truth and going, well, okay, you're right. I've never tried this before. So I am out of my comfort zone. Right. And I know you're trying to protect me. But if I just stay where I am, I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to develop. I'm not going to advance my business or my career. And it's almost soothing it to say, look, it's okay. I've got this. So I love that perspective because it doesn't always have to be that it's the bad guy, you know, it's good and evil. It puts different parts of ourselves. And I also love what you say. If you almost separate it a little bit from you, you can almost, it's like a character and you can then have a conversation with it and it's not part of you. So you can get a bit of clarity and distance.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love the way you talked about it then, because almost if you were to talk to your inner critic like a child, you would be a lot more empathetic and patient and understanding rather than it was
Yeah.
like evil twin or something. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting. That's really,
Yeah.
really interesting. Such fantastic advice. So we talked about working with clients on the inner critic and this idea that career is very much an inside job. How else would you work with clients? Tell us a little bit about your business and what it looks like on a day-to-day basis and how you help people be the best they possibly can.
Yeah. So I work with people, mainly mid to senior career professionals, and in different ways, because ultimately they'll come to me with different challenges. Some people might be in a leadership role and they feel like under huge pressure that that role isn't sustainable anymore. I'll work with them, basically break down, well, is it the role? Is it how the role is shaped? Or is it about how you're operating in the role? So there's an opportunity then to say, well, actually, I don't always have to do what I've always done. I could lead differently and get a different result, maybe in work and at home. Sometimes people have been promoted, and that's wonderful. But it's almost when you're promoted, it's like, well, the organization says, well, we've helped you now, go do. But the next role, the next level, it requires what's got you here isn't going to get you there. You have to then lead differently. And if you're leading a different, more experienced team, it requires something different. So again, I would work with the leader, not just on who they are, what their values are, what's important, but also the skills around leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, when it comes to career, it could be those people who feel, you know, they've been climbing the ladder and they're asking the same question I asked. Is this it? Is this all there is? Maybe I want to pivot. Maybe I do want to change company just for a new experience because I love what I do. But I would say those on the surface are the things that I work with people. But ultimately, why I keep saying that career leadership success is an inside job, because I really work with people under the surface. When I want them to feel different, to transform when they're working with me. I want them to really understand themselves and their values, their vision for their life. I want them to look at beliefs they might have about themselves, beliefs about conflict, beliefs about failure, and question those and change those if it's holding them back. And found time and time again, when I work with people, and I always assume they have the answers, right? And this is why I think coaching is magical, because I look at them as resourceful. I know they have the answers, and I use the tools and techniques to help them find the answers, so that after they've stopped working with me, they can continue to coach themselves. They can continue to take steps forward that feel right for them. So it's that combination of insight and self-awareness. But as you said, it's also about taking decisions and action, because self-awareness is just psychological entertainment unless you do something with it. And I'm in it for both. And it takes commitment, and it's hard work, and it's uncomfortable, but so is staying stuck in your career. And, you know, we only come this way once.
And there's so much growth in the uncomfort, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So when we talk about career being such an inside job, a lot of what comes from the inside is often your values, isn't it? And what drives you and your core beliefs and how you operate in the world based on how you feel and the values that are really true to you and to your heart. How do you work with values with people to really understand what's driving them and what's core to them, and therefore how that turns up in terms of leadership behavior?
Yeah. The word values, lots of corporates have values. They're on the website. And yes, in some organizations, you can see them at play around how they do things, how they treat their staff. I think for individuals, we also obviously have our own set of values, but I'm not sure how many people are really aware of what their values are in their own words and consciously aware on a day-to-day basis if they're present or not, but they are. So for example, if you've had a really great day in work and you're back home at the end of the day, or you've had a great day in your business and you're telling your partner, your family about what happened, your values are somewhere there, right?
Yeah.
And you have been living them in that great day. And the converse is true. If you've had a really bad meeting or a difficult conversation that has created these strong emotions in you, your values are there too. And maybe they haven't been demonstrated, or you have a need there that hasn't been met. And it's so important to know your values, because particularly if you're a leader in the corporate world, you know, there's a lot that's happening around you. Certainly the more senior you are, you have more influence over the strategy around the decisions around people. And like, for example, for me, two of my core values are fairness and sort of openness and honesty. And because I care about those so much, it means then that when I was a leader in the corporate world, I would lean into those. And it might mean that I would speak up in a meeting and I would challenge things because I was sort of honoring my value of honesty. Now, that's still uncomfortable. We talked about discomfort already. But if it's important to me, I'm more likely to lean into that because it's who I am and what I want to stand for as a leader. Or, you know, fairness. An old boss used to describe me. In fact, my nickname was Three Fights Atkinson, because when it came to the team and the people, I would put a suggestion forward. If it didn't get across the line, I would try again. And we laugh about it now. But I'm okay with being called Three Fights Atkinson because I felt my intention was right. Of course, you can always learn and refine how you get your message across. But I'm proud of that nickname because that very much speaks to who I am as a leader.
Yeah.
But what I do want to say is when you're in the corporate world, though, sometimes your values are not the same as other people. And that's where you might have a values clash. So it's not about saying, well, these are my values, so I'm just going to do what I want. It's knowing yourself and how you want to show up as a leader, and then getting curious about other people's values, and then looking at how you bridge the gap. And it's a bit like a dial. It's not a switch. Will I turn honesty on or I turn it off? Because that's also not helpful.
Yeah.
But it's this situation, I want to lean into more transparency because it's going to serve the business, my team, my leadership. I'm going to do that. So super important, your values.
Love the idea of a dial rather than a switch, like on and off, whether that's your characteristics, whether that's your personality, whether that's your values. What a lovely way to talk about it is a dial rather than a switch. Because, people have said to you before, oh, you're too passionate. I was like, what, you asked me to be less passionate? It was like the advice was actually really good in there, but the language was wrong. It was like, don't just turn it off, just dial it back. I was like, okay, because it's situational. It's not asking you to not be something. It's just how situationally you change it so that it's reflective of the people around you and the values of other people, as you mentioned, and the environment that you're in. That is such wonderful advice. We are so quickly running out of time, which I'm absolutely gutted about. I have so many more questions for you. Yeah. So I will ask you my final question. So at the Ripple Impact, we call our guests wave makers because they are making waves on the industry. And we always ask our guests this last question, which is, what advice would you give to aspiring wave makers?
From my own experience, it's definitely to pay attention to the patterns in your career, not just the sort of external milestones. And if you are feeling drained or conflicted in your job or your career, don't ignore it. Pay attention and lean into that. Because I think every ripple moment that I had, it almost brought me back to myself, and thinking about what is important and asking those questions. What do I really want? And what am I good at? And what does the next move look like for me? And also, it doesn't have to be this big leap or this big dramatic overhaul. It can be a series of steps that might lead to a significant change, but you don't have to do it all at once. That's why I'm passionate now about working with people to stay curious in their careers earlier so they can have work and lives that fit who they are, not who they were told to be.
That is such fantastic advice. Elaine Atkinson, thank you so much for sharing your story with such honesty and with such depth. Your journey is such a powerful reminder that success isn't just about titles. It's not about this ladder. It's not just about climbing higher. It's about alignment. It's about courage. It's about listening to those quieter voices, silencing the inner critic, really listening to your gut instincts, listening to your inner champion and your inner wisdom, and really giving it space. Elaine, thank you so much for your time. It's been so wonderful to speak to you today.
Thank you, Laura. I've loved our conversation.
Me too. Thank you so, so much. For everyone podcast listening and YouTube watching, keep chasing your curiosity. Stay brave in your choices. Listen to your inner champion and never underestimate the ripple impact of those quiet inner voices telling you it's time for something more. And if you're looking to elevate the human storytelling of your brand, please get in touch with us, The Ripple Impact, so we can see how we can help your business grow. That is a wrap on this Ripple episode. Tune in weekly for more bold voices and inspiring wavemaker guests just like Elaine. I'm Laura Barber. This is The Ripple Impact. We will see you all next week. Elaine, thank you so, so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.